What is going on, Jet fans? Matt O'Leary back with another video. Today I want to talk about some Davante Adams comments that he made to Kay Adams about the Jets losing culture and potentially another draft mistake in the mid-rounds for the Jets. We'll talk about it. So Davante Adams was on with Kay Adams. He goes on every week, and he was asked about the Jets losing culture, and here's what he had to say.
And you're watching these rookies, you're watching the Braylon Allens and Isaiah Davis is making plays, and you're watching Garrett Wilson, who's never had the success that you've had, Davante. He studies you. He wants that. To hear him say, I think we just have a losing gene. Like, what does that do to you? What do you think of that?
I mean, it's in some ways it's true. I mean, it's gene, culture, whatever word you want to plug in there. It's the same idea. Obviously, this team hasn't made the playoffs for, I think it's 14 straight years. You got to have the right people, whether it's in the front office or if it's in in the locker room or quarterback or whoever. You have to have enough people that have won those games and know how to finish those games, and just have it in that building. Like, it's not in this building to finish out games, historically. The way that what it takes to be able to be a good team in this league. And Garrett basically said it. You got to be able to establish that at least early on in the year, like I said, to give yourself a chance to, be able to win games that are essentially playoff games, for us. Being in a situation where we dug ourselves such a big hole, you got to be able to win those games. And if you don't have guys that have done it, enough guys that have done it and understand what it takes and understand that feeling of what it takes to win those games, it's going to be really tough. It just definitely doesn't just happen.
In some ways, it's true. It's not in this building to finish out games historically. Guy's been here 5 minutes, and he's right. He's right. Especially this year, they have blown so many games late in games, but it's also something that they've done for a really long time. They have, you don't get the longest active playoff drought by accident. You have to do some pretty horrible things and do some pretty bad decisions at, coach and with the roster. And it's just not in them right now for whatever reason to find ways to win. That's why I think it's so important the Jets need to get this hire right, and why I heavily lean towards bringing in someone who is a proven coach in this league and one with success. And it's why Mike Vrabel is my favorite option, because he left Tennessee with a winning record. He made multiple playoff appearances, made it to an AFC championship game with Ryan Tannehill as his quarterback, and is generally wide respected around the league. He's a kind of no-nonsense guy and someone with a proven track record that could get this stench out of the Jets. That's the only word I could think of to use, is stench, because it doesn't seem to matter who they're putting in. Like, you bring in Aaron Rodgers, who won a bunch in Green Bay and, won a Super Bowl and MVPs, all that. That didn't seem to matter, right? And injuries played a factor in it too, let's be honest. But I think it has to start with the GM and the coach. And that's why I'm interested in poaching a GM from a team that has, won a lot, because they've seen firsthand what it's like and how you have to go about doing it. And then hiring a coach who could double up on that. It's still TBD if he will be here next year for the New York Jets. It's going to depend, I think, on what Aaron Rodgers does, if he's here, if Rodgers leaves. If Rodgers leaves, maybe you'd also see Davante Adams leave. Maybe the new regime wants a nice 1-2 punch at the wide receiver for whatever direction they decide to go at the quarterback spot. Like, there's a lot of ways for this domino to fall. And clearly, based on his performance since being here, I think Davante Adams does have something left in the tank. It's just, does he want to be here, number one? And whoever comes in as the GM and the head coach, do they want that guy and to allocate the money towards that guy? If you're asking me now, if I had to pick, I don't think he's back, but I'm not against the idea of bringing back Davante Adams. I just think they kind of clean slated and get rid of the pieces who aren't long-term options here. And Davante Adams would not be a long-term option at his age, but in the right circumstances, if he comes back, I'm not going to be, flipping my lid over it. The second thing I wanted to get into was the discussion around Malachi Corley. So he was the Jets' third round pick from this year. They actually tried to trade up into the second round. It was seen in their own documentary that they posted that from around, I think it was like pick 45, the Jets started picking up the phone and trying to call up teams to move up for Malachi Corley. And you saw the reaction of Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh. They got their guy. This is the one that they wanted, the guy they wanted so badly. It was leaked that he was their fourth wide receiver on the board. Like in this draft class, he was number 4 on their board. And now, 13 games into their season, he can't even be activated? So what went wrong here? On the year, he has 3 catches for 16 yards, 2 carries for 26 in 8 games. Obviously, against the Texans, had that brutal mistake of dropping the ball before going into the end zone. So is it another draft mistake, or is it the Jets don't know how to use the guy? I'm going to take the cop-out answer here, but I think it's probably in all likelihood a mix of both. I know Jet fans probably don't want to hear that. Especially not even after all the way through his first season, to be like the Jets made another mistake here. But I don't think it's accidental that he hasn't been getting on the field. If you watched him at Kentucky or Western Kentucky, he was never a great route runner. His strength was getting the ball in his hands and making plays with the ball in his hands. And maybe there's a world where the Jets' next offensive staff just finds ways to get him the ball a few times a game. I think best case scenario for Malachi Corley, and I wouldn't consider it a draft mistake if this is the case, that he turns into a gadget guy who gets maybe 2-3 touches a game, maybe has a special teams role. If that's the case with a third round pick, then yeah, I think you sign up for it, and he's like your 5th wide receiver. Okay, fine. Unfortunately, with the track record of Joe Douglas in the mid rounds, not very good on the offensive side of the ball. I think Joe Douglas's best late finds in the draft all came on the defensive side, whether it's UDFAs or finding like Michael Carter or Brandon Eccles or Jamie Sherwood, like guys who have not been, top 40 picks, let's say, who've come in and been productive. That was the good, but there were too many times where they weren't able to do that offensively. They found Breece Hall. That was a top 40 pick. And, he's been a really good player. Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis look like they potentially could be guys who could at least contribute to an NFL roster. But then you have, unfortunately, like Denzel Mims, who never really showed much, even though, there were things that I liked about Denzel coming out. It just didn't work. Elijah Moore clearly didn't work out with the Jets. That was a 2nd round pick. They've just had their fair share of whiffs, and it goes back way further than that. I mean, especially at the wide receiver position, it's not fair to hold that against Joe Douglas because he wasn't here for it, but this is an issue for the Jets and has been for a long time. Stephen Hill, Devin Smith, Chad Hansen, Ardarius Stewart, they were never able to get much out of those guys. The last guy that they probably got that overachieved, I'll give you 2, Quincy Enunwa and Robbie Anderson. I think they got the most out of those 2 guys and developed them as, a 6th round pick for Enunwa, UDFA for Robbie Anderson, and they were legitimate NFL contributors for a few years. I don't want to, poo-poo the guy, and clearly, like, he still has 3 years left on his rookie contract after this year, Malachi Corley, and whoever in the next offensive staff is going to have the ability to come in and see if they could figure out a plan for this guy. I'm a little down on the idea that he's going to turn into anything more than, a gadget guy. Again, there is some value in that if used correctly. The Jets, as currently constructed, can't figure out a way to use him. And my hope is that the next regime can, but I'm not going to, hold my breath over that one, if you get my drift here. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on both Malachi Corley, what you want to see from him going forward, and of course, Davante Adams' comments. Let me know. I'm Matt O'Leary. Subscribe if you're new, and I will catch you next time.